Hi, good morning. Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. I'm here with Laura Middleton from Farm Adventure. How you doing, Laura?
Oh, great, thanks. And do you, Mike?
Yes, really well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. So, if you could give us a bit more background as to who you are, what it is that you do, and how long you've been doing it for, please, Laura.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been running Farm Adventure for 13, come 14 years this year. I started the business with my now husband, Rob Middleton. It was his brainchild, but I take some of the credit along the way. And basically, he's a farmer through and through and came up with this awesome concept of team building activities, farm style, which there was nothing out there at the time. And I was living in London at the time when he had this idea. He put an advert out for someone to come and join him to help get this idea started. I found said advert, was absolutely on board, and moved from London to Yorkshire to start this exciting idea. And it's just gone from there. So over the years, it's just grown, started in Yorkshire, expanded to Shropshire back in kind of 2015, 16. And yeah, it's just gone from there.
Fantastic. Number of things running through my head to ask you there. So, firstly, what made you go from London to Yorkshire to run a farm adventure company? What was the spur for doing that then?
Randomly, I was looking on a website called Escape the City. And there were some crazy job adverts out there. The one above this one was for a 3 month secondment in Antarctica, which I did look at. I was like, this sounds exciting. And then the next one, obviously below that, said opportunity in Yorkshire on a farm. And I've always been quite outdoorsy and whatnot. So I looked at this, and basically it was this introduction to Rob and this farmer who ran a farm. He also ran farm education at the time, which was where school kids come and do land-based studies. But he had this other idea about team building, read it and was like, this sounds brilliant, and got in touch. And he was really friendly, very open, very honest about his ideas and thoughts. And obviously it was a startup, so it would be voluntary. And where I was working at the time, I was working from home, so I could relocate but still keep the job, and just start this idea with him um, in Yorkshire. And it started on this as a sideline and then kind of grew from there. So I was just hooked because I am more outdoorsy. I like to think of myself as someone who's lived in cities, lived in towns, lived in the countryside, not quite as rural as Yorkshire where I am now, but yeah, it's all good, and adaptable to moving and trying new challenges and whatnot. So really excited by the idea and the concept. And I also knew that there'd be a lot of people out there who would love the opportunity to come and play on the farm without having the stress of actually having their own farm.
So, had you run a business before? Had you got any experience in that field?
Absolutely nothing. Basically, just always been employed or self-employed, but working for a business full time. Had ideas of my own over the years and kind of dabbled in many crazy out there ideas, and you'd think about them and soon realize that they weren't going to come to any fruition. Um, but then when someone presented the opportunity, um, yeah, I was absolutely on board.
So, what has the business journey been like to date? If you could maybe summarize it in one
Eye-opening.
word. Eye-opening, two
Yeah.
words. That's good. That's good. Yeah.
Um, I think I still consider myself as, in many ways, as an employee, because of my job role within the business. Rob is very much more the entrepreneurial person. He is much more savvy and connected with always think about the financial side, about the progressive side, whereas I'm much more of the doer. I kind of love getting involved. I started off running the groups, talking to people. I've always kind of worked in customer service. So that was where my kind of strengths were. And in hindsight, we didn't need two people who were kind of had the exact same skill set. We needed people with um, various skill sets. So in hindsight, it's probably the right way it needed to be. But yeah, it's been a bit of learning over the years, especially given that we got together during this journey as well. So suddenly the dynamics do change somewhat, and there's a bit of learning on that side as well.
Yeah. We speak to a number of business partners and life partners who work together, and yeah, that's another dynamic involved in running a business. And so it is fascinating to learn that part of the journey as well, and how the relationship needs to be business and then separate to to that, and combining those two can be an interesting journey for people. So in terms of where you are now and what the future looks like, give us a bit of a description of that. So you've had an eye-opening journey along the way. What does the future look like? Yeah, and what are the challenges and opportunities that you've got from where you've been?
In events, post-COVID, trends are changing. Our weekend groups are stag hens, birthday parties. We only have adults to the farm to do the activities that we offer. And during the week, it's corporate team building. The team building grew when we first started, was a growing market when we first started, obviously trying to get authorization internally for businesses to kind of allow team building, have that spend on team building was a bit tricky, but I think we saw in COVID that this would be an opportunity, because obviously well-being, mental health was, big topics, and sustainability, and we can kind of tap into all of those. So the corporate side was fine, but the trends are changing for the weekend groups, the personal bookings. So going forward, last year, for example, we've kind of realized those trends have changed, and we've kind of had to adapt quite quickly because we were a bit slow to the market. I think being in this, 13 years, one of the kind of downfalls is that you can become complacent if the business kind of ticks along, if things are going well, but you can become a bit complacent. And if you're not careful, you miss what's happening, and trends are changing. Once upon a time, everybody booked ahead of time, a year in advance. Now it's a lot of last minute bookings, short time frames, obviously with the kind of cost of living crisis, things are changing with how people spend money and how people view the money, and when they're going to commit to something that isn't deemed a necessary spend or cost. So we've got to take all of these things into consideration. And that's been a bit of learning. And so it's now adapting for the year and the years ahead. With that, there's a lot more competition, diversification with farmers and farming. There's a lot more competition in terms of accommodation out there. So, you've always got to be looking, and complacency can be a bit of a trap, I think we've seen last year for us. And we are hopefully picking ourselves up and chasing that and fixing that and working with it. But then, so it kind of means that we've also said, right, we need to really start acting like business people, and forecasting, watching the data, which is something I used to love when we first started out. I loved watching the data, looking at what we've done and planning and all that kind of stuff. And going back to that is actually quite good fun. It's inspiring, it's motivating, all these kind of things, but it's good, and we need to act like business people and do that, really.
Fantastic. That's a great share, because sometimes those things can be forgotten or deemed not as necessary. But when you go back to them and you realize, so it gives you an outlook for where you're going, and more stability in your decision making. It can do. So it's a good.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's the biggest lesson you would say you've learned, Laura, along the way today, if there's one that you could pick out in running the business?
I think there's lots of little lessons along the way, but I think the complacency is one thing that can creep up, like I say, because we are, I'd like to say fairly far down the line of running a business for 13, 14 years. That excitement and novelty and progressiveness and change, and all, that's probably continually happening for the first however long. So the adapting, once you're really settled in it, and keeping this business going. And it's one of those things that I suppose if you'd have asked me, 13, 14 years ago, imagine the business in 15 years,
Yeah.
and you're doing that same job, because we change jobs along our kind of career, to progress, to move for a bit of freshness, whatever it might be. Whereas this is saying you are going to be within that same thing in theory for a long time.
Mm.
Like, that's quite an interesting concept to get your head around. So I think there's a real learning at the moment. I feel like this is bigger than anything that's been along the way. There's always little things to learn, but this is a big one.
Yeah. Are you in it for the next 15 years? What do you have an idea of what the end goal looks like, and working back?
Not necessarily, because it often changes. When we expanded to Shropshire, for example, we were getting inquiries for team building when we were in Yorkshire only, and the inquiries were coming more from the west side. And we said, what about being able to fulfil those inquiries on the west side? So that's why we set up and we bought a small holding just on the kind of Welsh border, so that we could kind of reach the Birmingham, Liverpool, Chester, Manchester corporates. But when we were in the kind of midst of getting excited about expansion, we said, well, what about we go east, west, and a little bit south, M4 corridor. But then once you've done an expansion, you need to have a bit of a rest, because
Yeah.
it's not plain sailing at all. And, so for the past few years, I've been like, absolutely not. But I don't know, the kind of door's a little bit ajar again, and you're like, put it, no, stop, don't do that. Maybe.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think growing the business and becoming full to capacity is what we need. We need to kind of focus on this and not get distracted with other ideas,
Yeah.
and make it really work. Because obviously, like I say, complacency can be dangerous. You've got to prove and keep proving that what you've got works, and there's competition out there, and
Mhm.
sometimes gives you a kick up the backside. And one thing I've always said is I want Farm Adventure to be a brand name out there for team building, and we're not there yet. So I'm like, we'll keep working at that. And that's, however that looks, I don't have a definite plan. It's always moving and always changing. And that's probably what's exciting about it anyway.
And what inspires you to do what you do? So kind of beneath it all, this could be building that brand, the team that you work with, it's kind of just the planning and the excitement of it. What is it that inspires you? Is it still that same thing that when you left London to go to it and have an adventure on a farm? What is it
Yeah.
makes you kind of, I suppose, get out of bed of a morning and carry on with it?
Probably is a little bit of everything. I don't think there's one like Rob is probably someone who's more motivated by money in some way, shape, or form. It's not quite as black and white as that. But whereas I loved originally when I was running the groups and talking to everybody, and you talk about your story, you talk about how you got there, you find out about them, and all this kind of back and forwards. And then I'd love the inquiries, and you'd have conversations, you build relationships with these people. And especially if they were booking a year in advance, you'd have a lot of conversations before then they turn up, and you'd have a hug. You'd hug these basically complete strangers who have come for the hen do, it's or
Love it.
whatnot. And it's you do build that up, and then they're gone, and whatnot. And then there's the other side, which is having a team. People management is an absolute huge learning curve. I had no leadership experience, and you know, it's tough, but I'd like to think I'm open to learning. I want to be better. But having a team of people and working with them and seeing them achieving, like, the excitement on an event day, and working together, running around like, you know, crazy people, and just trying to get this done, but achieving and having a beer together at the end of an event, or whatnot, that's got a kick in itself. But then equally, saying we've expanded to Shropshire, we've formed a blueprint for something that we've been able to roll out in Shropshire, is brilliant as well. So it's all of it, and it is yeah, it is exciting. And they're the kind of things day to day that each of them individually, it's not necessarily one thing. Each of them individually, I think, kind of give you that overall buzz and that
Yeah.
excitement for keeping going.
Sounds like a great sense of achievement, sort of fulfillment through that. the amount of
Yeah,
experience that you're having and learning and open-mindedness and all of the above. Yeah, sounds brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. So, if you were to meet yourself, say at 18, Laura, and give yourself a piece of advice before starting out on all this, what would it be?
good question. I think being open to explore. Um, there's a huge world out there, and I've always said about, how could you define your career when you're with your careers coach at, 15, 16 at school? How can you define it when the job I'm doing didn't exist? You
Mhm.
know, so I think being open and willing to learn. Um, Interestingly, I keep quoting recently that my cousin years ago quoted 99% of life is opinion, which, you then try and disprove and you realize it is. And so that kind of open-mindedness of listening to people rather than thinking your own opinion counts, and it is set and it is where it is. So I think being receptive, being open, and trying new things is important, and yeah, moving with what you want to do, and keep being honest with yourself about what you want to do. And if you're genuinely not happy and something doesn't fit, um that's okay, but
Mhm.
timing is everything. Put your, as Rob likes to say, gonna regret quoting him here, but put your rod in the water, and only then will you get some bites and see what happens. You've got to keep
Yeah,
trying.
good stuff. Great advice like that. Thank you. So lastly, then, in terms of any latest news about what you're up to, or even it's a case of sharing a website so people can find out a bit more about what you do, potentially some interest in booking on and getting a farm adventure for themselves, what can they do? Where can they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So Farm Adventure is all about fun on the farm for the grown-ups. It's time to leave the kids at home or get out the office. Often you have inquiries and people saying, "Oh, can I bring the kids?" You're like, they've got Diggerland, they've got everything else out there. They've had their time. This is time for you guys. You can go head to head on a John Deere tractor with your boss, with your partner, whatever, and see who really is better at driving. So it's
Yeah.
it's Yorkshire and Shropshire. We're accessible in both locations. We are a working farm in Yorkshire. We started from the genuine article with beef farm, with sustainable farming. We've got all those things which help people understand about what sustainability is, and it's also getting out into the countryside, into the good fresh air, and getting away from you know, the pressures of life. And come what may, for a get together, a reunion with friends on a weekend, family, whatever, or get your boss to take you guys out of the city and unwind and have a really good belly laugh. I've always been an advocate. I've never quavered in or wavered in my thinking about, knowing that farm adventure is a brilliant opportunity to really kind of down tools and come and have fun, at things you never thought you'd do. And there's a lot of learning, subliminal learning. You don't have to feel like you're being educated or it's force fed. There's a lot to learn without kind of feeling like you're going back to the classroom. So yeah, massive opportunities at farmadventure.co.uk.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. It's been a real pleasure talking with you, and thank you very much for sharing all that you have. And I wish you the best for all the future success of the business.
Thank you very much. Great to talk to you.